This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
Easily the most anticipated fantasy book of 2025 for me is The Strength of the Few by James Islington. It comes out in just a few months in November, but I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy courtesy of James himself, and I quite enjoyed it. Tune in for a full non-spoiler review of what you can expect for Book 2 of the Hierarchy series, the sequel to The Will of the Many. I think the biggest thing to know about The Strength of the Few is that it is quite different from The Will of the Many in some fundamental ways. I think some readers may find themselves missing some of the familiar tropes of Book 1, but in all, this book takes the series to new heights, to new directions, turns into something unique and new and exciting, and I think it is definitely a move for the best. The Will of the Many is in some ways a story that we've kind of heard before with the hyper competent main character and a fantasy school trope. Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with this. It's kind of similar to The Name of the Wind, and it's a type of story that I love and a lot of readers love. However, by the end of The Strength of the Few, it's really clear that Islington wanted to take this series in a different direction, and I would say that we're even kind of on the border of science fiction, and I'm really excited to see where books 3 and 4 go. Now, in order to achieve this, James Islington ratcheted up the complexity of Book 2, The Strength of the Few, quite a bit in a way that takes a lot of skill to pull off as an author, and I think he did in a really admirable way. I don't think it was perfect. I have some quibbles and some, maybe preferences of differences here and there of different ways that maybe I would have liked to see the story done. But overall, I think it was executed very well and is a very ambitious project that overall is, I think, going to prove to be quite successful. Now, if you read The Will of the Many a couple years ago when it first came out and haven't touched it since then, you may want to do a reread or at least kind of refresh the last few chapters when it gets into the big twist because the beginning of The Strength of the Few is not very forgiving. We get right into the action. It picks up immediately after the events of book one, and some big things are revealed, some things are talked about. We don't get a lot of a recap, so you're going to want to refresh yourself or you're going to get a little bit lost. A lot of big questions are answered right from the beginning, a lot of things we've theorized and speculated about for a couple of years. Or are they? I guess we'll have to see how true some of this information is, right? Now, a lot more questions are raised, and by the end of the second book, we have some more theorizing to do. We were able to put some puzzle pieces together. As soon as I finished the second book, I spent, a solid hour or so kind of reviewing a lot of the little nuggets that Islington puts in there, trying to do a mental calculation of what could mean this and why this character did, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a really masterful job of how he weaves enough little hints here and there where it makes the reader feel smart when you're able to figure some things out, but also kind of itches the back of your brain why someone did something in a certain way or why this offhand comment was issued and what it could have possibly meant. So there's so many little things like this, some of which we understand now, but a lot of which is we're gonna have to wait till books 3 and 4. As part of this, the magic system will is expanded on quite a lot. In the first book, we don't get a lot of it. We don't have a great understanding of it because Viz doesn't really use it very much. In the second book, that's going to change. We get a massive expansion. It's on page quite a bit more, and we get a lot more rules to it, a lot more different, combinations of things and speculation as to how things work and why, as Viz himself tries to figure out, exactly how things work and what is possible. And this lends itself into a lot of interesting plot moments where things work out in ways that are satisfying because we understand the magic system enough for it to be paid off, such as Sanderson's like third rule of magic, whatever that is. We have two big new settings that add a lot of complexity to the story, one of which is like this Mistborn Final Empire, except it's Egyptian, and then the other is a 10th century Ireland type of setting. If you've read the Gale song by Shauna Lawless, it feels a lot like that. I kind of wonder if Islington is a fan of that series because myself, having read those, I thought this fit right in with that type of setting. Each one is, feels very separate, obviously. They have a lot to lend into the overall narrative and makes for a lot of interesting cross between all three of our settings. And then naturally, in order to make this work, we have three different POVs. The story is split. It's a lot more split than the first book. Some may like this, some may not like it as much. This means that we've got to split up page time between all three, which means some characters are not going to be on screen as much. And I think that's a little bit sad to see some of our favorites from book one not show up quite as much. It does mean that we are introduced to a lot more characters, some of which are going to become fan favorites. But they don't quite get as much time on screen, so they may need a little bit more, even into like books three and four to develop. So I had some mixed feelings on this. I see from a plot reason why that why Islington went with this. However, I do think there's some natural downsides. Now, one thing that hasn't changed at all is the pacing. The pacing in book one was very aggressive. Things were always happening, and we always had this tension of Viz, being discovered and things not working out. This carries through into book two. The action is always moving forward. However, since we've split things up a bit, it sometimes feels like we have our finger on the fast forward button as we're moving through a lot of the not dull, but like more mundane parts of the story. We've just kind of skipped through those parts and we get right into the action. Now, again, this is going to be some pros and cons depending on your preference. Personally, in these first person narrative type of books, I really enjoy just kind of like sitting with the character in their day to day, seeing how things are going, enjoying their small triumphs and losses, and dealing with all their different challenges. And that's what The Will of the Many really brought to the table. Even though it had a very aggressive pace, we still kind of sat with Viz for a lot. And this doesn't really have that quite as much. So you may miss that a little bit. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss like this is a very masterful job of weaving all of the different plot elements and settings and characters that Islington has here. He's got a lot to balance. He's got about 700-ish pages to cover in book two, and just so much to pack in here. The pacing, the fast pacing helps with this because we can get through a lot. However, I never really felt like we were moving terribly too fast. There were times where, maybe I would have slowed things down a little bit more. Like I just mentioned, I kind of like the, sitting with characters a little bit, but I could see the reason for everything that he decided to do. And overall, I'm very impressed by the story he was able to weave into. I mean, 700 pages is a lot, but he covers a lot of ground in this book. Now, finally, book one had a lot of strong emotional beats, especially Viz's final trip back to Seuss, which I thought really carried the novel forward and added a lot of heart into it. There are similar moments here in book two that really make you feel for characters, feel deeply, a lot of words of wisdom, some deep stuff that's imparted. It's not just action. I mean, there is a lot of action. There's a lot of exciting stuff. There's some big set piece things that happen. There would be some things you think back on that kind of, a little bit mind blowing. They completely turn the tables of what's going on. But in all of that, there's also a lot of heart in the story. And I think it needs that and it really benefits from that. And I'm glad that this carried through from book one. So overall, in The Strength of the Few, we have a very fast-paced, very exciting fantasy book that changes a lot from the first book, but emerges into something that I think is the best move forward for the rest of the series. I was very impressed with The Strength of the Few. I didn't quite like it as much as the Will of the Many, but I think that's a little bit of a preference thing. I'm someone who, like I said, my favorite book is The Name of the Wind. I like these slower burns, and I think a lot of people will be just fine with where The Strength of the Few goes. There are probably a lot that enjoyed it more than The Will of the Many. For me, it wasn't quite there, but overall, I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10. Some small quibbles with things that maybe I would have done differently, but overall, I'm very impressed with the follow up, and I'm excited to see where we go with books three and four. It's going to be a little bit of time. These are massive projects, but Islington is moving along pretty well with his writing. You can keep up on his blog. So I have full confidence that this is a series that we're going to enjoy for years to come. And I think it's going to be one that I continue to recommend as a hot new series that a lot of people will immediately latch onto. It's something that even new fantasy readers could jump into and really enjoy, and maybe something that brings a lot of people into the genre. So I'm excited for this one. Thank you, James Islington, for continuing to pump out good stuff. And once we get the book released in November, we'll do a full spoiler chat and talk about theories and et cetera, because there's a lot of meat to dive into. Very excited for people to read the book. If you want to hear more from Phantology, you can obviously like and subscribe to the channel and check out our weekly podcast long form content. But you can also join our Discord where we'll be talking about this book in depth. We'll have a dedicated channel for you to post all of your thoughts and other readers to bounce theories off of, etc. And then we'll be hosting a book club where we'll meet and chat at least one time. So if you're interested in a small little tight knit community, hop on our Discord. It's a good time.